Okay, there is this Chinese name. Hello, welcome to the live stream. It would be a mistake to assume that most changes in trend are very abrupt affairs. The fact is that important changes. May I know your name, brother? Like how to pronounce this? Is this Chinese, Korean? I'm just curious. It would be a mistake to assume that most changes in trend are very abrupt affairs. The fact is that important changes in trend actually requires. Okay, you are Korean. All right. So can you write down your name in English so that I can pronounce it at least? Welcome to the stream. The study of these transition periods. Okay. If I'll mispronounce, then I'm really sorry in advance. So your name is Sinjai Won. Sinjai Won. All right. So if I'm mispronouncing, sorry in advance. And welcome to the live stream, Sinjai Won. So basically, if you're curious about my channel, so I generally cover the content related to trading and stock market. Primarily, my focus is on Indian markets, but yeah, concepts and people are same in all the type of markets. So if you are interested in stock market or trading in general, then you can check out the channel. And if there is any particular topic that you want to discuss, then I am open for it. So whoever is joining for the first time, make sure you're liking the stream and you can check out the channel. If you're into trading and stock market, then make sure that you're subscribing to the channel as well. Right. मेरा content ज़्यादातर हिंदी में होता है, but since the guy is from Korea, so that's why I'm speaking in English, right? The study of these transition period, and their forecasting implication leads us to the question of price patterns. आई होप मेरे साइड से कोई एको वगैरह ना हो. ठीक है. Price patterns are pictures or formations which appear on price charts of stocks or commodities that can be classified into different categories and have predictive value. Two types of pattern: reversal and continuation. There are two major categories of price patterns: reversal and continuation. As these names imply, reversal pattern indicates that an important reversal is in trend is taking place. The continuation pattern, on the other hand, suggests that the market is only pausing for a while, possibly to correct a near-term overbought or oversold condition, after which the existing trend will resume. The trick is to distinguish between the two types of pattern in as early as possible during the formation of the pattern. In this chapter, we'll be examining the five most commonly used major reversal patterns: the head and shoulder, triple tops and bottoms, double tops and bottoms, spike or V tops and bottoms, and the rounding or saucer pattern. We'll examine the price formation itself, how it is formed on the chart, and how it can be identified. We will then look at the other important consideration, the accompanying volume pattern and measuring implications. Okay, volume plays an important confirming role in all of these price patterns in times of doubt, and there are a lot of these, lots of those. A study of the volume pattern accompanying the price data can be deciding factor as to whether or not the pattern can be trusted. Most price pattern also have certain measuring techniques that help the analyst to determine minimum price objectives. While these objectives are only an approximation of the size of the subsequent move, they are helpful in assisting the trader to determine his or her reward to risk ratio. In chapter 5, so we are currently in chapter 5 only. In chapter 5, we'll look at a second category of patterns, the continuation variety. There we will examine triangles, flags, pennants, wedges, and rectangles, different type of shapes the market make. These patterns usually reflect pause in the existing trend rather than trend reversal, and are usually classified as intermediate and minor as opposed to major. Preliminary points common to all reversal patterns. Before beginning our discussion of the individual major reversal pattern, there are few preliminary points to be considered that are common to all of these reversal patterns. The first one is a prerequisite for any reversal pattern is the existence of a prior trend. Okay. The first signal of an impending trend reversal is often the breaking of an important trend line. The larger the pattern, the greater the subsequent move. Topping patterns are usually shorter in duration and move more volatile than bottoms. Okay, beeps are. Actually, I have to go study now, so I'll come back to watch this broadcast again next time. I think the theme of your live broadcast seems interesting and fun. Thank you so much for your kind words. And yes, continue with your study. Thank you so much for being here. We'll I'll see you soon in my live stream soon. Thanks for your kind words, brother. Have fun. Have a great day ahead. See you next time. See you next time, brother. The need for a prior trend. The existence of a prior trend is an important prerequisite for any reversal pattern. What market must obviously have something to reverse. A formation occasionally appears on the charts resembling one of the reversal patterns. If that pattern, however, has not been preceded by a trend, there is nothing to reverse and the pattern is suspect. Knowing where certain patterns are most apt to occur in the trend structure is the one of the key elements in pattern recognition. Okay, we were talking about the 5 points, 5 to 6 points, right? The larger the pattern, the greater the subsequent move. Topping patterns are usually shorter in duration, more volatile than bottoms. Bottoms usually have smaller price range and take longer to build. Volume is usually more important on the upside. The need for a prior trend. The existence of a prior trend is an important prerequisite for a reversal pattern. For obvious reasons, market must obviously have something to reverse. A formation occasionally appears on the charts resembling one of the reversal patterns. If that pattern, however, has not been preceded by a trend, there is nothing to reverse and the pattern is suspect. Knowing where certain patterns are most apt to occur in the trend structure is one of the key elements in pattern recognition. A corollary to this point of having a prior trend to reverse is a matter of measuring implications. It was stated earlier that most of the measuring technique give only minimum price objectives. The maximum objective would be the total extent of the prior move. If a major bull market has occurred and a major topping pattern is being formed, the maximum implication for the potential move to the downside would be 100% retracement of the bull market on the point at which it all began, the breaking of important trend line. The maximum implication for the potential move to the downside would be 100% retracement of the bull market at or the point at which it all began. The breaking of important trend lines. The first sign of an impending trend reversal is often the breaking of an important trend line. Remember, however, that the violation of a major trend line does not necessarily signal a trend reversal. What is being signaled is a change in trend. The breaking of a major uptrend line might signal the breaking of a sideways price pattern, which later would be identified as either the reversal or consolidation type. Sometimes the breaking of the major trend line coincide with the completion of the price pattern. The larger the pattern, the greater the potential. When you use the term larger, we are referring to the height and the width of the price pattern. The height measures the volatility of the pattern. The width is the amount of time required to build and complete the pattern. The greater the size of the pattern, that is, the wider the price swings within the pattern, the volatility, and the longer it takes to build, the more important the pattern becomes, and the greater the potential for the ensuing price move. Makes sense? Virtually all it is similar to like what we learned in yesterday's live stream when we talked about important resistance levels or support levels or basically the trend line. The longer time it's spent in that particular zone, let's say a support zone, so if a market spend more time on that support zone, so it will become more important support zone. So for an example, if there is a zone and market spend around 8 to 10 days in that particular zone and it was continuously getting buying pressure from that zone, support zone, okay, and after that it broke, so then it will be considered as a major breakdown in that scenario, right? So similarly it will happen in the case of resistance as well. And if you'll consider it with support which is only in existence for like 2 days, so it will be comparatively a major like minor support. So the time, the more the time spent, the major the resistance or support or whatever the thing that we are discussing about, it will become the major one, and the lesser the time spent, it will become the minor one. Similarly here also they are saying the same thing. The larger the pattern, the greater the potential, and the more time it will spend over there, the more important it will become. So that is the whole idea, right? The breaking of an important trend line. The first sign of an impending trend reversal is often the breaking of an important trend line. Remember, however, that the violation of a major trend line does not necessarily signal a trend reversal. What is being signaled is a change in trend. The breaking of a major uptrend line might signal the beginning of a sideways price pattern, which later would be identified as either the reversal or consolidation type. Sometimes the breaking of the major trend line coincide with the completion of the price pattern. Hmm. Okay. A corollary to this point of having a price trend to reverse is the matter of measuring implication. It was stated earlier that most of the measuring techniques gives only minimum price objectives. The maximum objectives would be total extent of the prior move. If a major bull market has occurred and a major topping pattern is being formed, the maximum implication for the potential move to the downside would be 100% retracement of the bull market or the point at which it all began. The breaking of important trend lines. The first sign of an impending trend reversal is often the breaking of an important trend line. Remember, however, that the violation of a major trend line does not necessarily signal a trend reversal. What is being signaled is a change in trend. The breaking of a major uptrend line might signal the beginning of the sideways pattern, which later would be identified as either the reversal or consolidation type. Sometimes the breaking of the major trend line coincides with the completion of the price pattern. The larger the pattern, the greater the potential. When you use the term larger, we are referring to the height and the width of the price pattern. The height measures the volatility of the pattern. The width is the amount of time required to build and complete the pattern. The greater the size of the pattern, that is, the wider the price swings within the pattern, the volatility, and the longer it takes to build, the more important the pattern becomes, and the greater the potential for the ensuing price move. Virtually all of the measuring technique in these two chapters are based on the height of the pattern. This is the method applied primarily on bar charts, which use a vertical measuring criteria. The practice of measuring the horizontal width of a price pattern usually is reserved for point and figure charting. That method of charting uses a device known as the count, which assumes a close relationship between the width of a top or bottom and the subsequent price target. Differences between tops and bottoms. Topping patterns are usually shorter in duration and are more volatile than bottoms. Price swings within the tops are wider and more violent. Tops usually takes less time to form. Bottoms usually have smaller price ranges but take longer to build. For this reason, it is usually easier and less costly. Difference between tops and bottoms. Topping patterns are usually shorter in duration and are more volatile than bottoms. Okay, usually shorter in duration and are more volatile. Tops. Price swings within the top are wider and more violent. Top usually take less time to form. Bottoms usually have smaller price range but take longer to build. For this reason, it is usually easier and less costly to identify and trade bottoms than to catch market tops. One consoling factor which makes the more treacherous treacherous. I've learned this word, treacherous treacherous, which makes the more treacherous stopping patterns worthwhile, is that price tend to decline faster than they go up. Therefore, the trader can usually make more money a lot faster by catching the short side of a bear market than by trading the long side of a bull market. Everything in life is a trade-off between reward and risk. Okay, I was not expecting John J. Murphy to go this deep. Everything. All right. Okay. Pragya Rathore. Hi. That's my sister. Everything in life is a trade-off between reward and risk. The greater risks are compensated for by greater rewards and vice versa. Topping patterns are harder to catch but are worth the effort. Hmm. Volume is more important on the upside. Volume is generally how many people are participating in like buying and selling, right? So that's the whole point of that. Volume is more important on the upside. Volume should generally increase in the direction of the market trend and is an important confirming factor that the completion of all price patterns. The completion of each pattern should be accompanied by a noticeable increase in volume. However, in the early stages of a trend reversal, volume is not as important at market tops. In the early stages, obviously, because at the time the participation is comparatively less, right? क्योंकि कम लोगों ने participate किया है तो उस टाइम पे वॉल्यूम की उतनी इंपॉर्टेंस नहीं होगी जब आपका पैटर्न स्टार्ट ही हो रहा होगा तो दैट इज व्हाट दे आर ट्राइंग टू से. However, in the early stages of a trend reversal, volume is not as important as at the market tops. Markets have a way of falling of their own weight. Once a bear move gets underway, chartists like to see an increase in trading activities as prices drop. Chartists like to see an increase in activity as prices drop, but it is not critical. At bottoms, however, the volume pickup is absolutely essential. If the volume pattern does not show a significant increase during the upside price breakout, the entire price pattern should be questioned. We'll be taking a more in depth look at volume in chapter 7. This is chapter 5, in case if anyone is wondering. The head and shoulder reversal pattern. Let's take a close look now at what is probably the best known and most reliable of all major reversal patterns, the head and shoulder reversals. We'll spend more time on this pattern because it is important and also to explain all the nuances involved. Most of the other several patterns are just variation of the head and shoulders and will not require as extensive a treatment, sorry. This major trend reversal, like all of the others, is just a further refinement of the concept of trend covered in chapter 4. Picture a situation in a major uptrend where a series of ascending peaks and troughs gradually begin to lose momentum. A situation of a major uptrend, then that means the market is making higher highs and higher lows, where a series of ascending peaks and troughs gradually begin to lose momentum. So they are losing momentum, as in they are not going as high as they ideally should. The uptrend then levels off for a while. During this time, the forces of supply and demand are in relative balance. Once this distribution phase has been completed, support levels along the bottom of the horizontal trading range are broken and a new downtrend has been established. That new downtrend now has descending peaks and troughs. Hmm. The uptrend then levels off for a while. During this time, forces of supply and demand are in relative balance. Once this distribution phase has been completed, support levels along the bottom of the horizontal trading range are broken and a new downtrend has been established. That new downtrend now has ascending. Where is ascending? The new downtrend now has descending peaks and troughs. Okay. Distribution phase has been completed. Support levels along the bottom of the horizontal trading range are broken and a new downtrend has been established. That new downtrend now has descending peaks and troughs. Supply and demand is the key factor that is making the market move either side. That means either in upside or downside. Even in the case of sideways or trendless market, there is this balance between supply and demand. That's why the market is not moving in any particular direction, right? So since supply and demand is kind of equal, so the market is in a certain range. That's what is known as sideways market or trendless market. If the demand will be more, then market will move in a certain direction. If the supply will be more, then the market will move in the certain direction. Let's see how this scenario would look on a head and shoulders top. See figure 5.1a and b. एट पॉइंट ए, अच्छा पहले देख लेते हैं फिगर ना. ये है फिगर. तो मार्केट ऐसे मूव कर रहा था. हमने एक ट्रेंड लाइन ड्रॉ करी. हायर हाइज हायर लोज को ज्वाइन करते हुए एक ट्रेंड लाइन ड्रॉ करी. फिर एक नेक लाइन, मतलब एक और ट्रेंड लाइन ड्रॉ करी है. एक स्टीपर है कंपेरेटिवली और एक कम स्टीपर है. हेड और नेक लाइन ये है, राइट शोल्डर. ओके, लेट्स अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट the author is trying to say over here. Let's see how this scenario would look on a head and shoulder top. See figure 5.1a and b. At point A, the uptrend is proceeding as expected with no signs of a top. यहाँ पे the uptrend is proceeding as the way uptrend should be, right? Making higher highs and higher lows. और यहाँ पे कोई top का sign नहीं बना है. Volume expand on the price move into new highs, which is normal. जैसे ही new high बनता है तो वॉल्यूम भी बढ़ेगी, तो सेम डायरेक्शन में जा रहे हैं, तो दैट मीन्स दैट इज अ नॉर्मल साइन. वॉल्यूम ज़्यादा है, ज़्यादा लोग बाई कर रहे हैं, मार्केट ज़्यादा ऊपर जा रहा है, नए हाई बना रहा है. अप ट्रेंड में यही तो होता है, राइट? हम्म. द करेक्टेड डिप टू पॉइंट बी इज ऑन लाइटर वॉल्यूम. यहाँ से जो डिप आया है वो कम वॉल्यूम सा है। अगर आप सोच रहे हो कि वॉल्यूम का कहाँ से पता लगा रहे हैं, तो ये नीचे जो लाइन है ना, वॉल्यूम को रिप्रेजेंट कर रही है। जितनी ऊंची वर्टिकल लाइन उतनी ज़्यादा वॉल्यूम। तो जैसे हाई वाला पॉइंट है, इसके आसपास वॉल्यूम क्या है, ज़्यादा है। और जब डिप आया है तो कंपेरेटिवली यहाँ पे हम बोल रहे हैं कि जो वो है वॉल्यूम है वो कम हो गई है। करेक्टिव डिप टू पॉइंट बी इज ऑन लाइटर वॉल्यूम। यहाँ पे वॉल्यूम कंपेरेटिवली कम है, यहाँ पे देखो, ठीक है। लाइटर वॉल्यूम विच इज ऑल्सो टू बी एक्सपेक्टेड, वैसा भी होना चाहिए। At point C, however, the alert chartist might notice that the volume on the upside breakout through point A is a bit lighter than on the previous rally. At point C, at point C, the alert chartist might notice that the volume on the upside breakout through point A is a bit lighter. तो यहाँ पे जो वॉल्यूम है पॉइंट सी पे, पॉइंट सी देखो हायर हाई है कंपेरेटिवली। अगर लास्ट हाई देखा जाए ए से तो उससे ऊंचा है, पर यहाँ पे वॉल्यूम ए के कंपैरिजन में कम है, which is also to be okay. Notice that the volume on the upside breakout through point A is a bit lighter than on previous rally. This change is not in itself of major importance, but a little yellow caution light goes on in the back of the analyst's mind. So जो analyze कर रहा होगा, इतना बड़ा कोई मतलब इतना बड़ा कोई पॉइंट है नहीं है कि इसके बेसिस पे सप्लाई, इसके बेसिस पे आप बाई और सेल करो, इतना बड़ा कोई मेजर पॉइंट नहीं है। बट येलो कॉशन लाइट की तरह है कि यहाँ से कुछ आपने कॉशियस रहना पड़ेगा मार्केट में। दिस चेंज इज नॉट इन सेल्फ ऑफ मेजर इंपॉर्टेंस, बट अ लिटिल येलो कॉशन लाइट गोज ऑन इन द बैक ऑफ द एनालिस्ट माइंड. Example of a head and shoulder top, the left and right shoulders A and E. ओके, सो जैसे हमारी बॉडी का स्ट्रक्चर होता है ना, हेड कंपेरेटिवली शोल्डर से थोड़ा सा ऊपर होता है, तो इसीलिए हेड एंड शोल्डर नाम भी रखा गया है ना इसका। दो हेड, दो हेड, दो शोल्डर्स हैं, लेफ्ट और राइट शोल्डर्स। अगेन जो 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 दो पीक है, और हेड जो है वो टॉप मोस्ट पॉइंट है, यानी कि मार्केट अपने टॉप पे गया है। यहाँ से क्या होता है, सिंपल से समझते देखो, मार्केट एक अप ट्रेंड में था, मार्केट ऊपर की तरफ जा रहा था, ये अपने टॉप मोस्ट पॉइंट पे पहुंचा तो उसको हमने हेड बोल दिया। इससे जो पहले वाला हाई था उसको हमने लेफ्ट शोल्डर बोल दिया। और यहाँ पे जो इसके बाद अगला जो शोल्डर बना है या अगला हाई बना है वो लास्ट हाई से नीचे है, राइट। तो ये राइट शोल्डर बोल दिया। तो ये जो पैटर्न बना ना, इसको बोला गया है हेड एंड शोल्डर पैटर्न, राइट। ये जो दोनों शोल्डर है ये सिमिलर हाइट पे, यानी कि प्राइस सेम रेंज पे होगा यहाँ पे। The head C is higher than either shoulder. C is higher than the either shoulder. Notice the lighter volume on each peak. दोनों पीक पे जो इस साइड पे है, notice the lighter volume on each peak. Alright, lighter volume on each peak पे lighter volume है। हम्म, ओके, each peak पे lighter volume है। Alright, participation comparatively कम है। ओके, the pattern is completed on a close under the neckline, line 2। ये है neckline जो हमने ट्रेंड लाइन बनाई है, neckline बोला गया इसको। जैसे इसके नीचे क्लोज होगा तो ये पैटर्न कंप्लीट हो जाएगा, ऐसा बोला जा रहा है। तो जैसे मार्केट एक अप ट्रेंड में था, हायर हाइज बनाते हुए आया था, उसने यहाँ पे एक हाई बनाया, अगला हाई उससे ऊपर बनाया, और इसके बाद जो अगला हाई बनाया वो लास्ट हाई के इक्विवेलेंट बनाया या कंपेरेटिवली बराबर बनाया। तो ये हेड हो गया, दो शोल्डर हो गए। फिर हमने एक नेकलाइन ड्रॉ करी। जैसे ही नेकलाइन से नीचे मार्केट की क्लोजिंग आएगी जो एफ पॉइंट पे आ रही है, जैसे यहाँ पे एक क्लोजिंग आएगी तो हम बोलेंगे कि ये वाला पैटर्न कंप्लीट हो गया है। ठीक है, अब यहाँ से मार्केट जैसे ही अगले हाई पे जाएगा उसके बाद नीचे की तरफ सेलिंग आएगी, सेलिंग को फेवर करेगा। The pattern is completed on a close under the neckline, line 2. The minimum objective is the vertical distance from the head to the neckline projected downward from the breaking of the neckline. A return move will often occur. तो हो क्या रहा है देखो, यहाँ से एक रिटर्न मूव आएगा, रिटर्न यानी कि डाउन साइड की तरफ मूव आएगा। इससे पहले ट्रेंड क्या था, एक अप ट्रेंड था। रिटर्न मूव विल अकर बैक टू द नेकलाइन। यहाँ से एक रिटर्न मूव नेकलाइन तक आएगा, विच शुड नॉट recross the neckline once it has been broken. अच्छा ठीक है, तो यहाँ से एक रिटर्न मूव आएगा नेकलाइन तक, नेकलाइन को ब्रेक नहीं करेगा, और फिर वहां से सेलिंग आएगी। सो या दैट्स द होल पैटर्न, जिसको हम हेड एंड शोल्डर पैटर्न बोल रहे हैं। एक बार दोबारा से मैं समराइज कर देता हूँ। हेड एंड शोल्डर पैटर्न यानी कि हेड और दो शोल्डर, यानी कि तीन पीक हमारे पास टोटल है। मार्केट एक अप ट्रेंड में था तो उसका जो पीक था और जो उसका हाईएस्ट पॉइंट था, ये पीक जो हायर हाई था उससे एक ऊपर हायर हाई बना, और इससे ऊपर ये था, जो नेक्स्ट पीक बना वो इससे नीचे था, तो यानी कि हेड बीच में मान लिया हमने, और जो दोनों साइड के पीक थे वो कंपेरेटिवली सिमिलर लेंथ के थे, एक ही हाइट के थे, तो ये दोनों शोल्डर मान लिए। फिर हमने एक नेक लाइन ड्रॉ करी। अब होगा क्या, जैसे ही हम बोलेंगे कि ये नेक लाइन से नीचे क्लोजिंग देता है, जैसे एप पॉइंट पे क्लोजिंग आई नेक लाइन से नीचे, तो हम बोलेंगे कि पैटर्न कंप्लीट हो गया है। अब यहाँ से जब थोड़ा सा बाइंग आएगी तो वो नेक लाइन को ब्रेक नहीं करेगी, और नेक लाइन के आसपास जाके फिर नीचे की तरफ एक सेलिंग पॉइंट बनाएगी। तो ये आपका हेड एंड शोल्डर पैटर्न होता है, जो कि एक ट्रेंड रिवर्सल टाइप का है, क्योंकि मार्केट एक अप ट्रेंड में था, बट जैसे ये पैटर्न फॉर्म होता है उसके बाद मार्केट नीचे की तरफ आने लग जाएगा। वॉल्यूम से भी हमने इसको समझा था कि वॉल्यूम में कैसे हमको कंफर्मेशन मिल रहा है। तो यहाँ पे वॉल्यूम ज़्यादा थी, फिर इस हेड वाले पॉइंट पे वॉल्यूम कम थी, उसके बाद फिर वॉल्यूम फिर से डिक्लाइन हुई थी, फिर नीचे की तरफ आई थी। वॉल्यूम जनरली देखो, किसी भी केस में हाई हो सकती है, अगर सेलिंग ज़्यादा हो रही है तो भी वॉल्यूम हाई होगी, बाइंग ज़्यादा हो रही है तो भी वॉल्यूम हाई होगी। वॉल्यूम मतलब पार्टिसिपेशन ज़्यादा हो रहा है लोगों का, सो दैट इज़ व्हाट वॉल्यूम शोज। ओके, पार्टिसिपेशन ज़्यादा हो रहा है मतलब उस प्राइस रेंज पे कुछ तो इंपॉर्टेंट हो रहा है। अब एक रियल जो चार्ट है उसमें शो हुआ है, देखो मार्केट एक अप ट्रेंड में था, यहाँ पे लेफ्ट शोल्डर है, ये हेड बना, ये राइट शोल्डर है, फिर नेकलाइन, नेकलाइन से नीचे जैसे क्लोजिंग आई, फिर नेकलाइन के आसपास गया मार्केट, फिर वहां से नीचे गिरा है। सो ये एक हेड एंड शोल्डर टॉप रिवर्सल पैटर्न है। हेड एंड शोल्डर टॉप्स, द थ्री पीक्स शोन show the higher than either shoulder, the return move, see arrow back to the neckline occurred on schedule। यहाँ पे जैसे थोड़ा सा ऊपर का है फिर यहाँ से नीचे को आया, ठीक है। Prices then began to decline to point D, and something even more disturbing happens. The decline carries below the top of the previous peak at point A. Remember that in an uptrend, a penetrated peak should function as support on subsequent corrections. The decline well under point A, almost to the previous reaction low at point B, is another warning that something may be going wrong with the uptrend. जैसे यहाँ पे हो रहा था, ओके, ये वाले डायग्राम के कंपैरिजन में बना रहा है, जैसे ए से जब मार्केट नीचे आया बी, तो फिर यहाँ से फिर दोबारा नीचे आया, और इसको फिर ब्रेक नहीं कर पाया, इससे ऊपर नहीं जा पाया, तो ये भी एक साइन है कि मार्केट नीचे की तरफ जाएगा। The decline carries below the top of the previous peak at point A. Remember that in an uptrend, a penetrated peak should function as support on subsequent corrections. The decline well under point A, almost to the previous reaction low at point B, is another warning that something may be going wrong with the uptrend. The market rallies again to point E, this time on even lighter volume, and isn't able to reach the top of the previous peak at point C, जो head वाला portion था, वही था ना हमारे C, हाँ correct, ये head वाला portion at point C. Hmm. That last rally at point E will often retrace one half of two-thirds of the decline from point C to D. To continue an uptrend, each high point must exceed the high point of the rally preceding it. The failure of the rally at point E to reach the previous peak at C fulfills half of the requirements for a new downtrend, namely descending peaks. By this time, the major uptrend line, line 1, has already been broken, usually at point D, constituting another danger signal. But despite all of these warnings, all that we know at this point is that the trend has shifted from up to sideways. This might be sufficient cause to liquidate long position, but not necessarily enough to justify new short sales. तो ये जो पैटर्न बन रहा है ना, तो इसके बाद अगर आप बाइंग पोजीशन को लेके बैठे हो तो आपने वो सेल कर देना है। नई नई सेलिंग पोजीशन लेनी है, ये नहीं बोल रहा हूँ। अगर किसी ने बाइंग पोजीशन ली है तो वो सेल कर देंगे, क्योंकि मार्केट साइडवेज भी हो सकता है। साइडवेज होगा अगेन, अगर आप हायर पोजीशन लेके गए थे, बाई अगर आप पोजीशन लेके गए थे तो आप वहां से लूज ही करोगे। लेकिन नई आपने पोजीशन नहीं बनानी है, ये कंफर्मेशन नहीं है कि डाउन ट्रेंड स्टार्ट हो गया। उसके लिए आपने और कंफर्मेशन के लिए रुकना पड़ेगा। By this time, the major uptrend line, line 1, has already been broken, usually at point D, constituting another danger signal. But despite all of these warnings, all that we know at this point is that the trend has shifted from up to sideways. अप ट्रेंड से जहाँ पे हायर हाइज हाई लोज बनाते हुए जा रहा था, वहां से साइडवेज ट्रेंड पे आ गया है। दिस माइट बी सफिशिएंट कॉज टू लिक्विडेट लॉन्ग पोजीशन, बट नॉट नेसेसरली इनफ टू जस्टिफाई न्यू शॉर्ट सेल्स। द ब्रेकिंग ऑफ द नेकलेस लाइन neckline, necklace line, क्या ही चल रहा है। The breaking of the neckline completes the patterns. By this time, a flatter trend line can be drawn under the last two reaction lows, point B and D, which is called a neckline. By this time, a flatter trend line can be drawn under the last two reaction lows. अच्छा, neckline कैसे draw होती है? जो reaction lows है ना, वहां से draw होती है। ये रिएक्शन लो और ये भी रिएक्शन लो, यानी कि इन दो को हमने ज्वाइन करते हुए अपनी नेकलाइन बनाई है। ठीक है, और उसको एक्सटेंड कर दिया आगे की तरफ। मेक सेंस? Which is called a neckline. This line generally has a slight upward slope at tops, although it's sometimes horizontal and less often tilts downward. The deciding factor in the resolution of the head and shoulder top is a decisive closing violation of that neckline. The market has now violated the trend line along the bottom of points B and D, has broken under support at point D, and has completed the requirement for a new downtrend, descending peaks and troughs. The new downtrend is now identify the declining highs and lows at points C, D, and E and F. Volume should increase on the breaking of the neckline. A sharp increase in downside volume, however, is not critically important in the initial stage of a market top. Makes sense? यही हमने पहले भी पढ़ा था ना। अगर ट्रेंड रिवर्सल भी होता है तो जो स्टार्टिंग वॉल्यूम होती है जब ट्रेंड रिवर्स हो रहा है वो उतनी इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं होती है। तो यहाँ पे हमने क्या समझा, ये हेड एंड शोल्डर पैटर्न था जिसमें दो शोल्डर थे, एक हेड था, एक नेकलाइन ड्रॉ करी। बेसिकली यहाँ पे मार्केट एक अप ट्रेंड में था, फिर अप ट्रेंड ब्रेक हुआ है, मार्केट फिर साइडवेज गया और अल्टीमेटली जब ये तीन लोअर हाइज बने उसके बाद हम बोल सकते हैं कि ये जब ब्रेक होगा तो यहाँ से आप डाउन ट्रेंड के लिए अपनी पोजीशन बना सकते हो एफ पॉइंट के ब्रेक के बाद, जब नेकलाइन से भी सेलिंग प्रेशर आ रहा है उस टाइम पे। द मार्केट हैज नाउ वायलेटेड द ट्रेंड लाइन along the bottoms of B and D. कहाँ तक पढ़ लिया था हमने? Neckline. Okay, this line generally has a slight upward slope at tops, although it's sometimes horizontal and less often tilts downward. The deciding factor in the resolution of the head and shoulder top is a decisive closing violation of that neckline. The market has now violated the trend line along the bottom of points B and D, has broken under support at point D, and has completed the requirement for a new downtrend, descending peaks and troughs. The new downtrend is now identified by the declining highs and lows at points C, D, E, and F. Volume should increase on the breaking of the neckline. A sharp increase is in downside volume, however, is not critically important in the initial stage of a market top. The return move. Usually, a return move develops which is a bounce back to the bottom of the neckline or to the previous reaction low at point D. C point G, both of which have now become overhead resistance. Hmm. G, F and G. G is acting as a resistance, overhead resistance. Okay. Both of which have now become overhead resistance. D also. हाँ okay, D also. D and G. D and G. Basically neckline के जो part है ये एक resistance की तरह काम कर रहा है. The return move does not always occur or is sometimes only a very minor bounce. Volume may help determine the size of the bounce. If the initial breaking of the neckline is on very heavy trading, the odds for a return move are diminished because the increased activity reflects greater downside pressure. Lighter volume on the initial break of the neckline increases the likelihood of a return move. That bounce, however, should be on light volume, and the subsequent resumption of the new downtrend should be accompanied by noticeably heavier trading activity. Summary. Let's review the basic ingredients for a head and shoulder top. तो एक बार जल्दी से हम समराइज कर लेते हैं हेड एंड शोल्डर टॉप में क्या क्या था। एक प्रायर अप ट्रेंड, हमारे केस में एक प्रायर अप ट्रेंड था, मार्केट ऊपर हायर हाइज और हायर लोज बनाते हुए जा रहा था। अ लेफ्ट शोल्डर ऑन हैवियर वॉल्यूम, यानी कि लेफ्ट शोल्डर जो टॉप मोस्ट पीक था ना उससे पहले वाला जो पीक था वहां पे आपकी वॉल्यूम ज़्यादा होनी चाहिए, फॉलोड बाय करेक्टेड डिप टू पॉइंट बी। उसके बाद एक करेक्शन डिप आना चाहिए, मार्केट नीचे की तरफ जाना चाहिए पॉइंट बी तक। अ रैली इनटू न्यू हाइज बट ऑन लाइटर वॉल्यूम। हाईएस्ट पॉइंट जो बना पॉइंट सी पे, लेकिन वहां पे वॉल्यूम पहले वाले से लो होगी। अ डिक्लाइन दैट मूव्स बिलो द प्रीवियस पीक एट ए एंड अप्रोचेज द प्रीवियस रिएक्शन लो डी। अ डिक्लाइन दैट मूव्स बिलो द प्रीवियस पीक, अच्छा जो प्रीवियस पीक था उससे नीचे जो डिक्लाइन होगा वहां तक जाएगा प्रीवियस रिएक्शन लो के आसपास, यानी कि जो बी था उसके आसपास पहुंचा पॉइंट डी। अ थर्ड रैली पॉइंट पॉइंट ई, फिर एक और हाई बना जो सी से कंपेरेटिवली नीचे होगा ऑन नोटिसेबली लाइट वॉल्यूम। अगेन वॉल्यूम और नीचे होते जा रही है। दैट फेल्स टू रीच द टॉप ऑफ द हेड एट पॉइंट सी। अ क्लोज बिलो द नेकलाइन, अब जो नेकलाइन बनी है जो डी और एफ को मिला के बनी है, इफ आई एम नॉट रॉन्ग। डी और जी को मिला के बनी है, एफ तो बॉटम था ना, डी और जी को मिला के बनी है। इसका जैसे ब्रेकआउट ब्रेक डाउन आएगा तो उसके बाद मार्केट एक डाउन ट्रेंड में आ जाएगा, राइट। थर्ड, a decline that moves below that the previous peak at A and approaches the previous reaction low point D. A third rally point E on noticeably light volume that fails to reach the top of the head at point C. A close below the neckline. A return move back to the neckline point G followed by a new lows. ठीक है, एक रिटर्न होगा और उसके बाद फिर से नीचे की तरफ आ रहा है. What has become evident in three well-defined peaks, the middle peak is slightly higher than either of the two shoulders. The middle peak is slightly higher than the either of the two shoulders A and B. The pattern, however, is not complete until the neckline is decisively broken on a closing basis. ठीक है, तब तक हम मानेंगे नहीं कि जो पैटर्न है वो क्लोज हो गया जब तक कि नेकलाइन के नीचे एक डिसाइसिव क्लोजिंग ना आ जाए. Here again the 1 to 3% penetration criterion or some variation thereof or the requirement of two successive closes below the neckline, the 2-day rule, can be used for added confirmation until that downside violation takes place. However, there is always the possibility that the pattern is not really a head and shoulder top and that the trend uptrend may resume at some point. Okay. जब तक डाउनसाइड वायलेशन नहीं आता है, यानी कि ये वाला पार्ट बेसिकली जो ये नेकलाइन है ना, इससे नीचे क्लोजिंग नहीं आती है और मार्केट अगर ऊपर जा रहा है तो नेकलाइन को ब्रेक नहीं कर रहा है और फिर नीचे को जा रहा है, जब तक ये कंफर्मेशन नहीं मिलता है तब तक एक हेड एंड शोल्डर जो पैटर्न है वो नहीं मानेंगे हम बोल सकते हैं कि ठीक है ये एक पैटर्न बन गया, यहाँ से अभी अप ट्रेंड दोबारा से कंटिन्यू हो सकता है, बट जब ये वाली सिचुएशन ऐड ऑन हो रही है तभी हम मानेंगे, यानी कि मार्केट जब हम नेक लाइन से नीचे क्लोजिंग दे रहा है और उसके बाद फिर से थोड़ा सा रिट्रेसमेंट के बाद फिर से नीचे की तरफ जा रहा है हाई वॉल्यूम के साथ, तो हम बोलेंगे कि हाँ भैया अब जो है वो पैटर्न चेंज हो गया है, अब जो अप ट्रेंड में था मार्केट वो अब एक डाउन ट्रेंड में आ गया है, तो ये इसकी डेफिनेशन थी. A return move back to the neckline point G followed by new lows. What has become evident is three well-defined peaks. The middle peak is slightly higher than the either of the two shoulders A and E. The pattern, however, is not complete until the neckline is decisively broken on a closing basis. Here again, the 1 to 3% percentage penetration 1 to 3 percentage penetration criterion or some variation thereof or the requirement of two successive closes below the neckline, the 2-day rule, can be used for added confirmation until that downside violation takes place. However, there is always the possibility that the pattern is not really a head and shoulder top and that the uptrend may resume at some point. The importance of volume. अब volume की क्या important होती है? The accompanying volume pattern plays an important role in the development of the head and shoulder top as it does in all price patterns. As a general rule, the second peak, the head, should take place on lighter volume than the left shoulder. Okay. यानी कि देखो सबसे ज़्यादा वॉल्यूम ना लेफ्ट शोल्डर में थी, उसके बाद फिर मिडिल वाले उसमें फिर से वॉल्यूम थोड़ा सा नीचे गिरी और जो उसके बाद नेक्स्ट पीक बना उस पर वॉल्यूम और नीचे से गिरी, तो सबसे ज़्यादा वॉल्यूम ए पे, फिर सी पे उससे कम, ई पे उससे भी कम. This is not a requirement but a strong tendency and an early warning of diminishing buying pressure. ऐसा हो क्यों रहा है, बाइंग प्रेशर कम हो रहा है ना इसीलिए ऐसा हो रहा है, वॉल्यूम तभी गिर रही है. द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट वॉल्यूम सिग्नल टेक्स प्लेस ड्यूरिंग द थर्ड पीक, the right shoulder. Volume should be noticeably lighter than the previous two peaks. Volume should then expand on the breaking of the neckline. वॉल्यूम फिर से बढ़ेगी लेकिन जब नेकलाइन ब्रेक होगी तब, यानी कि सेलिंग प्रेशर आ रहा है तब बढ़ रही है. एंड देन एक्सपेंड अगेन once the return move is over. Volume should then expand on the breaking of the neckline, decline during the return move, and then expand again once the return move is over. ओके, सो बेसिकली मैं बताऊँ क्या कह रहे हैं, ये वाली बात कर रहे हैं कि यहाँ से जब नीचे आया मार्केट तो यहाँ पे वॉल्यूम बढ़ी, जब नीचे की तरफ आ रहे हैं यहाँ पे वॉल्यूम बढ़ी यानी कि सेलिंग प्रेशर ज़्यादा आ रहा है, फिर से वॉल्यूम कम होगी जैसे मार्केट ऊपर को जा रहा है और फिर यहाँ से जब नीचे को आ रहा है फिर से वॉल्यूम बढ़ जाएगी, तो ये बेसिकली एक साइन है कि हाँ मार्केट अब अपना ट्रेंड चेंज कर रहा है. हम्म one should be noticeably lighter on the previous two peaks. Volume should have hmm, decline during the return move and then expand again once the return move is over. As mentioned earlier, volume is less critical during the completion of market tops, But at some point, volume should begin to increase if the new downtrend is to be continued. Volume plays a much more decisive role at market bottoms, a subject to be discussed shortly. Before doing so, however, let's discuss the measuring implication of the head and shoulder patterns. Implications of the head and shoulder pattern. कहाँ कहाँ use होता है? Finding a price objective. The method of arriving at a price objective is based on the height of the pattern. Take the vertical distance from the head, point C, or to the neckline. Then project the distance from the point where the neckline is broken. Assume, for example, that the top of the head is at 100 and the neckline is at 80. The vertical distance therefore should be difference, which is 20. That 20 points should be would be measured downward from the level at which the neckline is broken. If the neckline in figure 5.1a is at 82, when broken, a downside objective would be projected to be 62 levels. 82 minus 20, 62. Another technique that accomplishes about the same task but in a bit easier is to, okay, basically let's understand it again. The method of arriving at a price objective is based on the height of the pattern. Take the vertical distance from the point from the head, point C, to the neckline. Okay, ये है ना जो यहाँ से हेड से आपने नेकलाइन तक ये डिस्टेंस मेजर कर ली कितनी है. Then project that distance from the point where the neckline is broken. Assume, for example, that the top of the head is 100 and the neckline is at 80. The vertical distance therefore would be difference, which is 20. That 20 points would be measured downward from the level at which the neckline is broken. If the neckline is in figure 5.1a is at 82 when broken, a downside objective would be projected to the 62 level. 82 minus 20, 62. Other technique that accomplishes about the same task but is a bit easier is to simply measure the length or the two or the first wave or decline, point C to D, and then double it. In either case, the greater the height or volatility of the pattern, the greater the objective. Chapter 4 stated that the measurement taken from a trend line penetration was similar to that used in the head and shoulder pattern. You should be able to see that now. Price traveled roughly the same distance below the broken neckline as they do above it. You'll see throughout our entire study of price pattern that most price targets on bar charts are based on the height of or volatility or the previous patterns. The theme of measuring the height of the pattern and then projecting that distance from a breakout point will be constantly repeated. It is important to remember that the objective arrived at is only a minimum target. Prices will often move well beyond the objective, having minimum target to work with. Clear and practical. Okay, I hope you understood it. That's great. Thanks for the support, though. It's important to remember that the objective arrived at is only a minimum target. Prices will often move well beyond the objective, having a minimum target to work with. However, is more very helpful in determining beforehand whether there is enough potential in a market move to warrant taking a position. If the market exceeds the price objective, that's just icing on the cake. The maximum objective is the size of the prior move. If the previous bull market went from 30 to 100, then the maximum downside objectives from a topping pattern would be a complete retracement of the entire up move all the way down to 30. Reversal patterns can only be expected to reverse or retrace that what has gone before them. Hmm, cool. Adjusting price objectives. A number of other factors should be considered while trying to arrive at a price objective. The measuring technique. I realize when I'm speaking at the time it's tricky to understand the concept. Rather, if I'll be just silent and I'll just read it out, then it's way easier to understand the concept. A number of other factors should be. That's very important. That's very important. The technicians must consider about other technical data in trying to pinpoint price targets taken from price pattern. The thing is, when you are setting a target, like at this point, I'll book my profit. So basically, it should be flexible in nature. It should not be too rigid. If a downside price movement, for example, projects a target to 30, let's say you decided when the market which is going in the downward direction it will reach at 30, so you'll book your profit. But let's say there is a prominent support at 32, then the chartist would be wise to adjust the downside measurement to 32 instead of 30. So at that case you are not supposed to wait till the 30 point. You should be taking your profit at 32 because there is a prominent support at 32 and market can go in the other way from 32 and you will lose your profit. So rather than being very rigid and pinpoint to 30, you should book your profit at 32 when you know there is a support level at 32. As a general rule, when a slight discrepancy exists between a projected price target and a clear cut support or resistance level, it's usually safe to adjust the price target to that support or resistance level. It is often necessary to adjust the measure targets from price patterns to take into account additional technical information. The analyst has many different tools at his or her disposal. The most skillful technical analysts are those who learn to blend all those tools together properly. The most skillful technical analysts are those who learn to blend all of those tools together properly. So that means whatever you learned, the thing is you have to make sure that you're applying all of them at the same time. So it shouldn't be like you're just focusing on one point and you're just completely ignoring the other factors or other technical information provided by the market. It shouldn't be like that, right? So it is like when the market, let's say you decided you have to book your target at 30, but you know that there is this prominent support level at 32, so you have to adjust your target at 32 and you have to book your target at 32, which is a safer option, right? Rather than losing from 32 level, then you'll regret later that I should have booked my target at 32 rather than going up from that point and losing more. It should be a wiser, what I can say, wiser decision to book your profit at 32 rather than waiting till 30. So yeah, a technical analyst or a skillful analyst are the ones who blend all of those tools together properly. So you have to have all the data and you have to apply them all at the same time. You need to get confirmation from the other indicator or other information that is provided by the market, right? So that is head and shoulder pattern, and the inverse head and shoulder I'll cover it tomorrow, I guess. It's already been like almost 1 hour. So yeah, today basically we started the chapter 5 of this book, Technical Analysis of the Financial Market, in which we have learned about many things, primarily about support and resistance, and majorly we learned about the reversal and continuation patterns, in which we our primary focus was on head and shoulder pattern, which is from the top. If I'll quickly summarize what we have learned, I'll just show you the chart. Where is that chart? So from the very beginning, this is the chapter, major reversal patterns. Then we went with the introduction, then price patterns, two types of patterns, reversal and continuation, and which is self-explanatory. And thereafter, the head and shoulder reversal pattern, which is this: the market was in a trend, then there is this left shoulder, after which the volume declined at this peak and at this peak also. And thereafter, once the neckline is broken, which is the joining of B and D, once that is broken and market retraces itself, and then again it went in the downward direction, so that will be a clear sign that the trend is now reversed. From an uptrend, now it became a downtrend. So that's what we learned. Certain things that we have to keep in our mind is that at this level the volume will be maximum, then here it will be comparatively lower than this one, then the volume will again decline. At this particular point, after the breaking of the neckline, the volume will increase. When it will retrace, the volume will decrease. Then again, when the market is moving in the downward direction, again the volume is getting increased. The reason being, at this level the buying pressure was more, so the volume was more. Then at this level the volume is getting declined because the buying pressure is getting declined. Then again the buying pressure is getting declined over here. And after the breaking of the neckline, why the volume increased? Because now the selling pressure is getting increased. So the volume is getting increased from this point. Volume is nothing but the participation of the uh, you know traders. It can be in the any direction. So yeah, the volume will increase again. Once it will go or retrace, then the volume will decline, and from this point again the volume will increase, because here the volume is getting increased because the participation is getting increased and the selling pressure is rising. So that's the head and shoulder pattern. Why it is named head and shoulder? Because the highest peak is at center, then the two peaks is left shoulder and right shoulder, then there is this neckline also, which is the bottom of the first peak and the second peak. So yeah, that's we learned. Then we learned about the return move, then we summarize what is the most important thing about this. Then we learned about the importance of volume. The more the volume should be, the more prominent the structure will become. Then we understood about the price objective. So it will retrace at the same level from where it started, the uptrend, right? So that will be the ideal or safer target. Then price objective needs to be adjusted according to other technical you know data. For example, if the support is at 32 and your target is at 30, so you should adjust your target to 30. So that's also we learned. And from tomorrow onwards we'll start with the inverse head and shoulder pattern. So yeah, that's good. So thank you so much, viewers. Thank you so much, Radharanji. Have fun. Peace out. Whoever's on the live stream, make sure that you're checking out the channel in case you feel like it will add some value to your life, so then you can subscribe to it. Otherwise, if you have no interest in trading or stock market, then you're not supposed to subscribe because it will lower my reach, right? So if you have any interest in stock market and trading, then you must subscribe, because I'm going to add value in the upcoming days. I'm going to talk more and more about the what I can say detailed topics related to stock market and finances. You can check out the content, and on the basis of that you can decide. And like, share and subscribe. So I'm signing off. Peace out.